Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the panel for joining us here today. And Mrs. Ghaisar, thank you so much for sharing Bijan's story with us. I know it's very hard for you to keep going over this again and again and still have no closure. Now, for those of you who are not aware, I am a former prosecutor. I was a criminal defense attorney, so I appreciate the roles that everybody plays in keeping our community safe. And Mr. Ago, I present my hats off to you because PDS has a national reputation for being one of the finest public defenders agencies in the country. So I know that you have been there in the trenches fighting for people's rights. And Officer or Agent Cosme and Ranger Northrop, thank you guys so much for your service. I appreciate your remarks and what you've done for our country. But I think it's important that we remember that all those roles are important to keep our community safe, and transparency and accountability are necessary for the public to trust law enforcement. And a part of that, I would hope that you agree, Agent Cosme, is that officers act under clearly defined general orders when it comes to use of force and pursuit policies. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. And would you agree that body cameras, when they're used properly and when they work well, they protect not only the civilians with whom officers interact, but also the officers themselves? Is that correct?
Yes, I do.
Right. Okay. Then that's been my experience in the jurisdictions where I've practiced, where we have dashboard cameras and things like that. Are you familiar with best practices and use of force and training policies?
Absolutely.
And have you had an opportunity to view Fairfax County's dashboard camera footage of Bijan's killing?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So in that footage, you observed that the officers got out of their cars with their guns drawn. Is that a best practice in a misdemeanor pursuit case?
Typically, it's not an initial best practice.
Okay, especially where they have no evidence that the person may be armed or threatening to them, right?
I don't want to comment specifically to Bijan's situation because I don't know the totality of the circumstances. I know, and I understand it's a tragic loss for his mother and his family, and I sympathize with that. But I don't know the totality of that. But in general, as a general rule, if it's a misdemeanor, that's not a best practice.
Okay, and is it generally a best practice to approach an automobile and slam your firearm into one of the windows?
I don't know the specifics of that case, but in general, no one should be slamming their firearm into anything. But I wasn't there at this specific incident. I don't want to comment specific to Bijan's incident because I'm not fully aware of the whole incident other than reviewing the video.
Right, so I understand. And generally, to kick an automobile is also not best practice, is my guess. Is that correct?
Typically not for a law enforcement officer. But I don't want to judge those officers. I was not there, and I don't know the totality of the circumstances. But in general, that's not the rule.
But might body cameras help capture footage that might explain why an officer was doing these things?
Yes, it can, but it's not the final solution in itself. Capturing the whole incident, because sometimes you have different angles. Like, for example, there have been some footage.
No, I'm not saying. I'm sorry. I'm just going to reclaim my time because I'm running out. Are officers trained to shoot at vehicles that are driving away from them?
Every department has different policies, and some policies they could be permitted to shoot at vehicles, and most policies they don't.
So most policies, most general orders prohibit driving or shooting at vehicles that are moving away from them. Is that correct?
Unless their life is in danger or someone else's life is in danger.
Very good. Now, going to the investigative process, is it typical to separate suspects and witnesses before they speak to law enforcement? Separate them from one another, witnesses to the same incident?
Yes, typically.
And the purpose of that is to make sure that they're not getting their stories straight or concocting a story. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Are you aware that officers Vineyard and Amaya rode back to the station together after killing Bijan Ghaisar?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay. Are you aware that the Park Police changed its use of force and its pursuit policy after Bijan's shooting?
I'm not aware of that, no.
Okay. Is it typical for internal investigations to await the results of criminal investigations, or can they be conducted concurrently, those internal investigations with the law enforcement agency?
Typically, what happens is the criminal part, if there's a criminal investigation in nature, that goes first, and then the internal disciplinary action goes afterwards. Historically, that's the way it works.
Thank you. I see that my time has expired, Mr. Chairman, so I'll yield back at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Cosme, I'd like to pick up where we left off. We were talking about those concurrent investigations, the criminal and internal investigation. You said generally the criminal goes first and then the internal.
Yes.
Now, during that time that internal investigation is pending, is it standard practice to, in a case where the officers were involved in a fatal shooting in the line of duty, is it standard practice to have those officers assigned to administrative duties such that they're not coming in contact with the public during that period of time?
It depends on each circumstance is different, but typically the standard practice is where they take administrative duties on pending the outcome of the matter.
So would it surprise you to hear that although it's been going on for almost 3 years, this investigation, whether it be criminal or internal investigation, after only 6 months, the officers Amaya and Vineyard were placed back on patrol duty? Would that be surprising to you?
That would surprise me, but every department has different policies internally, and I'm not specifically familiar with the policies of the U.S. Park Police.
Well, it is surprising because even though the park police were insisting publicly that these officers were on administrative duty, the Ghaisar family learned through civil discovery that in fact, and this was reported in the Washington Post, that in fact they'd been back on patrol since April of 2018. And not only that, they'd been in a patrol car patrolling together at the same time, which is, of course, another issue with the whole getting their stories straight. So those are things that give me great concern. Mr. Ago, would that give you pause as well that these officers are working together on a daily basis on patrol?
Yes, Congresswoman, it certainly would for the reasons that you stated.
Okay, thank you. So the only reason that we have any information at all is because of the U.S. Park, not because of the Park Police's transparency or their disclosures in this case. In fact, they have stonewalled since day one, and they continue to stonewall almost 3 years later. The only reason that we have this information is because Chief Rossler from Fairfax County Police Department released the dash cam video, and when he did so, he cited transparency and the public interest in doing so. And as we've heard today, the Park Police, FBI, DOJ have all refused to release any information to the family, including the 911 tape the 911 recording that got this whole thing started. Kelly, how has this stonewalling affected your family? What impact has it had on you and your family?
It's been awful. It's been awful. Not only our son was killed by the Park Police and federal and them being federal officers, we have been lied to. They have stonewalled information, and they have even prohibited the FBI agents who did the investigation into Bijan's shooting to attend the grand jury, if ever there would be any, by Fairfax County prosecutors. I don't know how much of cover-up, lying, stonewalling could come out of Park Police or Department of Injustice, as I like to call it. And it has affected us dearly because not only we've lost our son to an unbelievable non-reason, we have been lied to over and over again. Our trust in our government, our trust in our system is completely gone. We don't trust anyone. First. Second, please think about the youth of our country. Think about Bijan's friends. Think about all the 20-year-olds that have seen this over and over. And right now, my phone is blowing up with texts from Bijan's friends and our young family friends, and how disappointed they are. Why? Why can't we just say, this is what happened, this is the truth, we are sorry, what can we do? Let's make it right. Why can't we do that? Why have our government put our family through literally 3 years of hell? Instead of mourning, I have to be sitting here talking to this panel about a silly body camera. I mean, honestly, are we doing this right now today? This is how it's affected my family.
Thank you, Kelly. I know it's been horrible for you, and I hope that you do find justice, and I hope that we take the steps to prioritize getting body cameras and data and storage to our federal law enforcement officers so that no other family has to go through this in the future. Thank you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.